Мужики, в подвале уши!
For over 100 years, military experts have been predicting the death of the tank. After every major conflict, someone stands up and declares that this time, the tank era is finally over. But what if they're actually right this time? The Chieftain, one of the world's most respected tank experts, recently gave a brutally honest assessment of what's happening in Ukraine. Russian forces using Cold War technology in 2024 are simply asking for trouble. And when you look at the numbers coming out of Ukraine, it's hard to argue with him. Today, we're going to examine whether we're witnessing the end of an era or just another chapter in the tank's long evolutionary story. And what we've learned might surprise you. It's hard to believe. But the fundamental design limitations of every modern battle tank were decided decades before the first tank was even invented. And that's because of railways. When tanks were first invented in 1915, railways were pretty much the only option to transport tanks around the country. This means that tanks have to be narrow enough to fit on a railway car, which limits the width of the tank. But limiting the width, in turn, limited the length of the tank, because tracks have to be of specific proportions to turn properly. This constraint from 1915 still affects every tank designed today. You can't just make them wider without making them longer, and there are hard physical limits to both. Modern tanks already weigh 80+ tons. Most bridges and roads can barely handle that weight as it is. But before we dive into why this matters more than ever, let's talk about what's been happening in Ukraine, because the numbers are staggering. According to the Ukrainian military, Russian forces have lost 476 tanks. Open source intelligence has verified at least 263 Russian tank losses using photographs alone. To put that in perspective, that's more tanks than most countries have in their entire inventory, lost in just over 2 years of fighting. But here's what makes these losses so significant. It's not just the numbers, it's how they're dying. And it comes down to one brutal economic reality. A $30,000 anti-tank missile can destroy a $10 million tank. Think about that for a moment. The UK supplied Ukraine with thousands of NLOW anti-tank weapons, each costing around $30,000, that have a range of up to 0.6 miles. Reportedly, Ukrainians have nicknamed them N-Love, and soldiers have been caught on camera saying "God save the Queen" as they fire these weapons into Russian tanks. American Javelin systems cost around $175,000 each, but they have a range of up to 2.5 miles. From an economic and tactical standpoint, this is devastating for tank warfare. You're trading a relatively cheap missile for a vehicle that costs 30 to 60 times as much. Turkish TB2 Bayraktar drones cost about $5 million each, but they can destroy multiple tanks worth $50 million or more. The Pentagon has been so impressed by drone effectiveness in Ukraine that they increased their counter-small drone weapons program sevenfold just last week. This brings us to what the Chieftain calls the fundamental dividing line in modern armored warfare: thermal imaging. According to the Chieftain, there are really only two viable options in modern tank warfare. Either go completely low-tech or completely high-tech. The middle ground, what he calls mediocre tanks, is a death sentence. His assessment is stark. The thermal imager and associative fire control system, if you at least have that, you're useful. If you don't have a thermal imager, you are not worth the effort to be put into the field today. This creates some fascinating paradoxes on the modern battlefield. The Chieftain points out that a T-62 from the 1960s equipped with a modern thermal imager would actually be more effective than a T-72 from the 1980s without one. As he puts it, you're going to see the infantry, you're going to see the things that a T-62 is quite capable of dealing with just as well as a T-72. We've seen this playing out in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces operating BTR-3 vehicles with 30mm cannons and thermal imaging have been devastatingly effective. One soldier described the experience as looking like a video game, The thermal imaging made target acquisition so easy. Meanwhile, many Russian vehicles are still using antiquated IR spotlights that basically paint a giant "shoot me" sign for anyone with night vision equipment. These systems have a range of maybe 100 meters and can only see what's directly in front of them. But thermal imaging is just one part of a technological revolution that's making the battlefield deadlier than ever before. Let's talk about drones. The TB2 Bayraktar has become legendary in this conflict. This Turkish-made drone can cruise at 70 knots for up to 27 hours while carrying 4 small laser-guided bombs. Its operational range is up to 93 miles, but analysts claim it's really closer to 5 miles. What's remarkable is how effective these drones have been despite Russia's supposedly advanced air defense systems. Military analyst Justin Bronk has proposed several explanations for this. First, Russian armored columns rushed beyond the cover of their own SAM systems due to poor coordination. Second, Russian forces have been engaging in electronic warfare far less frequently than expected. And here's why. Jamming Ukrainian drone communications without jamming their own would require complex planning and coordination. But Russian forces have had substantial problems with their own communication equipment. It's been documented that the Russian military has been relying on cheap Chinese walkie-talkies and even stolen mobile phones. So jamming radio waves would hurt Russian forces just as much as Ukrainian ones. Plus, the TB2 has a smaller radar cross-section than larger jets and includes the BSI-101 signal intelligence system that can detect and track ground-based air defense radars, making them harder to shoot down. There's another factor that's often overlooked. The United States has been providing intelligence support to help Ukraine use these drones effectively. A U.S. defense official confirmed that Ukrainians receive a go-ahead to use drones against specific targets after receiving intelligence from NATO reconnaissance assets. But it's not just sophisticated military drones that are changing the game. Even consumer drones like the DJI Mavic are being used extensively by both sides. Ukrainian forces have been strapping RPGs to cheap commercial quadcopters and using them as precision-guided munitions. The really sobering part? When Ukrainians analyzed captured Russian drones, they discovered something remarkable. Russian drones like the Orlan, Eleron, Forepost, and Granat had only airframes and parachutes made in Russia. Everything else, engines from Japan, generators from Texas Instruments, controllers from European companies, GPS trackers from China, even Sony and Olympus cameras for reconnaissance. Not a single Russian-made drone captured in Syria or Ukraine contained Russian-made electronics. This reveals the biggest weakness of the Russian military-industrial complex, their inability to master modern microelectronics production. Now let's talk about why Russian tanks are performing so badly. It's not just about technology, it's about fundamental design flaws that have been baked into Soviet tank philosophy for decades. Most Russian tank designs have a significant vulnerability. They're built lower to the ground than Western tanks. While this makes them harder to spot, the size constraint means they don't have a fourth crew member and instead use an automatic loader system that runs a carousel of ammunition just underneath the commander and gunner positions. This makes tanks like the T-72 extremely vulnerable to turret strikes. Unlike Western tanks such as the M1 Abrams, Russian tank crews are not protected from internal explosions. There's extensive footage from Ukraine showing the catastrophic result of this design flaw. Tank turrets being hurled dozens of yards into the air in what's become known as turret toss. But it's not just design flaws. Russian forces have proven terrible at combined arms operations, coordinating tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support. Instead, they've been sending unprepared units in columns straight down roads where their movements can be anticipated and fired upon. This brings us to a broader question. If tanks are so vulnerable, why are militaries still buying them? The answer varies depending on who you ask. U.S. Army Chief of Staff General James McConville gave a blunt assessment in October 2022. You don't need armor if you don't want to win, and it's notable that Ukraine is still demanding tanks. They've put M1 Abrams, British Challengers, German Leopards, and M2 Bradleys at the top of their weapons request list. The Ukrainians particularly love the British Challenger tank. Despite being heavy and prone to getting stuck in mud, its highly accurate 120mm gun serves as a sniper rifle to take out Russian positions at distances of 4 to 5 kilometers. The chieftain makes an interesting point about this. He argues that in modern warfare, you need either the latest technology or overwhelming numbers of cheap systems. The middle ground is a death trap. He uses a World War II analogy. If you've got 15 tanks going up against 4, the firepower will tell. It doesn't matter if the enemy has slightly better individual tanks, numbers matter. The anti-tank gun fires, one of the 4 tanks may explode. 4 tanks come back, the anti-tank gun's not going to get another shot off. This creates what military planners call the high-low mix. You have a few high-tech assets providing intelligence and coordination, while cheaper systems provide the actual firepower. As the chieftain puts it, NN Law is only a one-shot weapon. You fire an NLAW, that's it, it's gone. You have a big tube, but you have a lot of them. The problem is that this approach doesn't mean it can't work, but that's not the Western way of war. Western militaries are built around expensive, sophisticated systems with highly trained crews. The idea of accepting heavy losses to achieve objectives goes against everything Western military doctrine stands for. But there's another factor that often gets overlooked in discussions about tank obsolescence: cyber warfare. On February 24th, 2022, just as Russian forces started their missile attack on Ukraine, hackers targeted modems that communicate with the Viasat K-ASAT satellite, which supplies internet access to customers in Europe, including Ukrainian military and police units. This attack affected thousands of modems across Europe, leaving them completely non-functional. 3 weeks after the attack, many modems still remained operational. This shows how cyber warfare can complement traditional military operations. The attack was designed to disrupt Ukrainian military communications, just as the ground invasion began. Interestingly, at least 3 wind turbines in Germany were also affected, showing how interconnected modern infrastructure has become. This wasn't about economic disruption. It was specifically targeting military communications. This is why Elon Musk's donation of Starlink systems to Ukraine became so important. Traditional land-based radios can only reach so far, and satellite communications provided a crucial backup when other systems were compromised. So where does this leave us? Are tanks actually obsolete? The honest answer is nuanced. Current Russian tank doctrine and technology? Absolutely obsolete. But tanks as a concept? That's more complicated. Here's the fundamental problem that tank critics often overlook. Drones and missiles cannot hold ground. Infantry still needs armored protection to move from point A to point B and to hold positions once they get there. Even the chieftain, who's been highly critical of Russian tank performance, points out that tanks work best in open areas like deserts or steppes. In urban environments, tanks become sitting ducks as mobile teams can fire from any building and relocate quickly. The real issue isn't that tanks can be destroyed. They've always been vulnerable to determine enemies with the right weapons. The issue is economic and tactical. When a $30,000 weapon can reliably destroy a $10 million vehicle, the math starts to break down. But this has happened before. In the 1970s, after portable anti-tank guided missiles proved devastatingly effective in the Arab-Israeli wars, analysts predicted the end of tanks. The Soviet AT-3 Sagar missile reportedly accounted for 25% of Israeli tank losses in 1973. Yet tanks survived and adapted. Similarly, during the 2003 Iraq War, urban warfare exposed serious tank vulnerabilities. American M1 designers rushed to create additional protective upgrade packages. But tanks adapted and remained relevant. The difference now might be the speed of technological change and the economics involved. Modern anti-tank weapons are getting cheaper and more effective faster than tank defenses can keep up. Major military powers seem to believe tanks still have a future, but with significant changes. The United States still buys about 100 tanks per year, despite the Marines calling them obsolete and giving them up entirely. The British are procuring 148 Challenger 3 tanks. Even Russia continues developing the T-14 Armata, though production has been limited. Future tank development is focusing on several key areas. Unmanned turrets would make tanks smaller targets and provide better crew protection. Active protection systems could intercept incoming missiles before they hit. Electronic warfare capabilities could jam or disable nearby drones and guided weapons. Some concepts involve separating tank functions into different vehicles. Reconnaissance drones providing eyes, command vehicles coordinating operations, and multiple smaller platforms providing firepower. Laser weapons are being developed for tank armament. There's even research into tanks carrying loitering munitions, drones that can be launched and left to hover over battlefields waiting for targets. The South Korean K-2 tank reportedly includes millimeter-wave radars for enhanced detection capabilities. Active protection systems are becoming standard, including jammers and laser dazzlers to defeat incoming threats. But all of these upgrades run into the same fundamental constraints we started with: railways. Tanks can't get much heavier without becoming impossible to transport. They can't get much wider without redesigning every piece of infrastructure they need to use. This suggests that the future might not be about better tanks, but about different approaches to armored warfare entirely. Looking at the evidence from Ukraine, several patterns emerge. First, tanks operating without proper support, infantry, air cover, reconnaissance, artillery coordination are extremely vulnerable. Second, technological superiority matters enormously. Third, economics are shifting in favor of defensive systems over offensive ones. But perhaps most importantly, the conflict has shown that you need either cutting-edge technology or overwhelming numbers. The middle ground, decent but not exceptional equipment, is where losses mount up quickly. The chieftain's assessment seems accurate. If you don't have a thermal imager, you are not worth the effort to be put into the field today. By extension, if you don't have modern communications, active protection systems, and sophisticated fire control, you're probably better off not putting tanks in the field at all. Ukraine has taught us that tanks aren't obsolete, but tank doctrine from the 1980s certainly is. The question isn't whether armored vehicles have a future. Infantry will always need mobile protection. The question is what those vehicles will look like and how they'll be used. Will Vladimir Putin's hypothetical 2030 victory parade feature a fleet of shiny new T-14 tanks? Or would it be a massed swarm of quadcopters? Based on current trends, it might be neither. It could be something we haven't even imagined yet. One thing seems certain: the age of mass tank formations charging across open ground is ending. What comes next will probably be smaller, smarter, and much more expensive. Whether we call them tanks or something else entirely might just be a matter of semantics. The tank as we know it might not be obsolete, but it's definitely evolving into something very different. And in warfare, as an evolution, it's not the strongest that survive. It's those most adaptable to change. What do you think? Are we witnessing the end of the tank era, or just another step in its evolution? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to see more analysis of how modern military technology is changing warfare, make sure to subscribe. We've got detailed videos about war-related stuff you won't want to miss.